I think, perfect product for, office. I mean, work from home kind of like, environment. Back then it was, well, I went to the university that's one of the top university over there.
You're running a company right now and you also run a venture capital fund. Seems like you have a lot of free time on your plate. Hello and welcome back to the Masters of Real Estate. This is Nik Shah. Today we are going to learn from Alexey Dubov. Alexey, how's it going, buddy?
Yeah, doing good. How are you, Nick? Thank you
Yeah.
for coming.
Been a long time since we hung out, so this is a good excuse as any to hang out and catch up more. And we've spoken a lot, but today was the first time I had a chance to go into your background in detail, and it's very, very impressive. So I'm sure our listeners will be very eager to learn from you. But before we get going into all that, Alexey, how do you introduce yourself?
So I introduced myself as a serial entrepreneur. I started 6 companies all across the globe with 2 exits. Most recent one is Mighty Buildings, and I also run BuildTech Ventures, which is a syndicate investing in construction tech.
Serial entrepreneur, started 6 companies, sold 2. You're running the company right now, and you also run a venture capital fund. Seems like you have a lot of free time on your plate.
Very good.
Alexey, the listener really wants to understand your personality before they understand your background. So what spirit animal or bird best describes you and your philosophy?
I think openness and curiosity, those 2 things are critical. And you can see, going through my kind of categories or, market segment that I went after, they're all different, right? So I would never stick to one. And that's all because of the curiosity.
And what spirit animal or bird do you think best represents the feelings of openness and curiosity in tackling new initiative?
I think that's, the main fuel is something that keeps me up in night, or where I'm happy to dedicate long hours to investigate something, regardless of the topic, maybe different topics. And if I find myself in such a situation, then it's something drives me a lot, and some things, crystallize in some bigger journeys and stories like company.
So are you like a night owl, basically?
No. It just, whenever they're you mentioned, I have a lot of free time, right? So in some cases, free time meaning a huge backlog of to-do items and things that to be done. But in some cases, it's very important to also prioritize, right? And I prefer to prioritize based on what I feel need to be done, because that's when it's the most productive. And when I feel I'm going towards some topic and I'm really curious, I really happy to dedicate more and more time to that. That it doesn't matter if it's early morning or it's at night, or I need to just free up one day to just dig into this. That's going to happen because I will, if we are really interested in something, we'll find time to do it.
Is that kind of the main operating principle in your life? Find really interesting things and dig down on them? No. So Alexey, if you had to think about a key metric that summarizes your entire professional journey so far, what would you say that is?
I think it's number of happy customers.
And how would you quantify that metric? How is that metric right now with Mighty Buildings today and the customers you have helped with your 6 startups in the past?
Yeah, so with Mighty Buildings, we delivered 60 buildings. So it's more than about the same number of customers. In number of people, it's probably slightly higher. Throughout my entire career, it's going to be thousands of people who are happy, and that's motivates me a lot. And another thing for founders, I think for any founder or people who in a founder seat, they have a unique opportunity to first of all go and see and talk to customers, translate their pain points and needs to the product, and do it again, right? All the time, validation, selling, and so on. So access to these 2 worlds is literally and then seeing, for instance, once you figure out how to sell and the product is good enough, then you see how your salespeople execute it, and you focus on some new dimensions, new directions of business. That's truly inspiring when it happens. I mean, there is another side when it doesn't happen. Different topic.
It is truly inspiring indeed to see the results of your success scale up to a team and going from building a product to building a team. So let's go back all the way back to zero. Before you started 6 companies, before you delivered 60 buildings, and before you helped thousands of customers become happy. What has been the broad trajectory of your life so far?
You mean back in the university, one of the first years of university? I was curious about my degree is in robotics and automation. And robotics is a unique discipline because back then, right now, I'm sure there is plenty of others. But robotics is unique because it's kind of combines a lot of different disciplines. So that's push you towards sort of be open to different kind of disciplines and information. And so getting back to zero, I started my first career move as I actually was hired to do some independent research for one of the company called AM Telecom. So my initial motivation was to become independent, and I started this on a second year university. But half a year later, I figured out that it's better to start my own company. So that's what I did. But look, I got lucky because the investor, he just called me while I was interviewing for the job. But the trick is I went for the interview not to be hired. I actually went there to learn. So I started doing I was going for job interviews without idea or any need for me to secure the job. I was going there just to learn about their business. So when I went there, I actually started asking all type of questions about their business. So the guy was really uncomfortable. And it turns out another person in the room who was completely silent, he was in the corner, was his investor. And he called me few weeks later saying hey, I actually want to start a company with you.
Wow. And that's how everybody our first investor.
Yeah.
And then seems like,
by the way, those relationships they lasted for so that was back in 2005 and up until I think 2016 or 17.
wow. It seems like almost a 10-12 year relationship that culminated in a really short period of time. And how was it, going to college in Russia and learning in that environment that really helped you succeed later in life?
Well, I went to the university that's one of the top university over there. So another name for it is MIT of Eastern back then. So later on, right after the university, I moved to Germany. So I spent a huge amount of time in Germany, then in Singapore. I think what literally helped me a lot is exposure to different cultures and understanding that it's very important to be focused on what people can create and what their motivation is. By the way, another story, when I started this company when I was running this company in university, I quickly understood that the best source of talent is actually going back to the university and convincing guys to join. So you're going back to the lecturers and saying hey, I have this company, and what's better is to work together and get money, right? And again, those relationships back then lasted for, people were following me for three companies.
Wow.
Yeah. So somewhat similar. So I had engineering, even when lived in Germany. So my development in engineering was in Russia, and that office was the core. So I moved some of the people to Germany, and they would support different ideas.
How was it like starting so many companies early on in your career? What was that experience like? And what really motivated you to go through all of that?
The motivation was, as I said, so I was just curious about something. There was an idea, and later on, I just typically whenever I have idea, I have also a habit of running by multiple people nonstop just to get a feedback and just share excitement. I learned this stuff, and you knew there is also this and that. And by the end of the day, also not all the ideas come from me, right? So a lot of them, they actually synthesized by multiple people, crafted, right? So someone came to them, I get motivated, I start digging into this, and then they crystallized in something that can become business. So I wouldn't say it's all me, ideation and generating ideas. But in some cases, yeah, it's literally about this habit of kind of like running this idea by multiple people. And by the end of the day, like, finding those who like, oh yeah, it's very interesting, or like they follow up and saying like, let's have another call. I like this. Maybe we should discuss it further. So I wouldn't say like there was any sort of like intentional, like, mood boards or something for ideas. It was always sort of like organic.
And what were some of the early mistakes you made as an entrepreneur, and how did you learn from those?
Oh, well, a lot of mistakes. I would say like all the learnings, I think it's the journey for any entrepreneur and the founder. Just, we learn on mistakes, and that's part of the process. That's okay. Specifically, even like, I said, like my main metric is, happy customers. Luckily, I think I will count only 100 to 10 unhappy customers. I remember someone told me, the path to product market fit is a graveyard of unhappy customers behind you. Well, you try to figure out like, how it works. But again, it's part of the process. It's more about to learn. I think like some mistakes that I did were kind of like I went from, in terms of the management style, right? I went from sort of like, free control to kind of like, giving more freedom to people and working with motivation. So in some cases, even if I don't agree with some idea, right, but I feel like the person is super motivated to do it, I see like, there are two scenarios, right? One scenario, the person will get back to me and I will support him with surprising results, like over exceed expectations. And that's beautifully happens like, from time to time. In some cases, the person will get to me like with something different, modified idea and the learnings, right? So it's very important for let people learn, and they will, they will just, as I said, like, overestimate expectations in the majority of cases. So that was like, terms early on, I was like, I even remember, I was pitching to one of the banks cure some money for us, and I embedded into the plan that I was hiring like very young professionals back then. And my plan for 3 years was expecting that each professional will deliver more in terms of like, the results. And I remember the person commented to me, like he said, like, what do you mean you're going to have like, 120% utilization of people? It's impossible. This is not a function. I mean, if he's not going to learn, I will fire him.
Yeah.
Not like that, but in general, like, but again, it was very early on, and I understood that just, there is a world of sort of like, very fixed scope, very fixed, kind of like, job description, and you hire people, but that's when your, business is already hot steam engine, and you just hire people for like, function purposes, right? In majority of cases, what I do, and I honestly, I know that I'm not good at that. So I'm good at kind of like, let's create something. Let's make sure to get in from 0 to 1, from 1 to 10. That's me, right? Getting to like, 100s and thousands. That's probably how to do it. I hire people and delegate it to other people. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And there are people with amazing strengths in the 0 to 1 and the 1 to 10 range. And most people, the personalities you need to go from 10 to 100 and 100 to 1,000 are completely different ballgame. So what were the themes of some of the companies you started earlier?
So early on, that was automated systems for retail solutions. So that's kind of like, B2B2C. So we placed automated robotic system on a point of sale for remember like CDs and DVDs, right? So I had a machine that was were able to automatically record CD and DVD and give it to people. So we have contracts with Warner Brothers, Electronic Arts, and so on. But by the way, one other learning: don't start business in a dying market, because it was in between. So when the prices for optical disc went up, like went down actually because of the China some initiative. It was I think 2007, and there was a very good momentum for like 5 years. Right, these times I think like the market moves way faster, but back then it was for 5 years. all retail spaces. Remember, like these stores with like a huge catalog of CDs and DVDs that you need to go through, like, to find what you, they were kind of like, not profitable on square foot basis. So they were looking for any other solution, right? And we were like the best one, right? So there was a huge demand. But 2012, so what happened? I went to the exhibition regarding content and creation in Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and I found out that 80% of innovation hall was dedicated to digital content right protection and streaming. So I went back to investors saying like, hey, look, it looked like, we are in a bad market right now. Time to pivot to something else. So in parallel, so what we also were working on, actually, one of the first one was the engine to convert text to speech, but it was very tiny engine on for Java to me. If you remember these old phones, right? You need to upload ringtones and stuff like that. Then I created Svet. So Svet is a light bulb. It's a lighting. So it's for residential lighting. The idea behind that was to create light, artificial light that can, as close as possible, mimic fun based on your personal life when you wake up, when you go to sleep. Similar to what Hue trying to do right now, Philips Hue. But back then, again, Hue doesn't have like, the full spectrum as we had. And and again, the idea actually happened like, very organically because it was 2011 when everyone was kind of like, okay, let's switch to LED lighting everywhere. So I ordered a bunch of LED lights for my person from China, and the quality was very bad. So in the evening time, I found myself with headache. I barely rarely have any headache. So after a few days, I just started thinking like, what's going on? Like maybe I need to take vacation or something like that. And then I found out that it's about light. So I started researching it. I found a number of like, scientific research and reports. And I understood like there is a lot of people just don't know about that. And there's a huge amount of research that's underutilized for people to just increase their productivity by, back then it was like 20%, depends on the task, but still 20% in some cases might be very significant. So next one was, I joined BuildTech. So BuildTech is a smart work clock before Apple Watch. I think perfect product for, office. I mean, work from home, kind of like, I remember back then it was, from the office, but the idea is quite straightforward. When you enter any room and there is a clock, you already have a behavior to glance in on it. So we added more information to this by hiding the display behind the traditional like.
Wow.
And then Mighty Buildings. So 2017 Mighty Buildings, construction, 3D printing and construction. And somewhat like almost like 2.5 years ago, BuildTech.
Wow. So seems like you worked quite a bit in the hardware space, whether it's clocks or CDs or trying to build text to speech, which is kind of a hybrid of hardware and software. How did the experiences there help you eventually transition to the construction field and real estate?
In terms of product development, I think the process are the same. Like, for hardware, the only like, big difference is construction is not that repeatable process because each and every building is unique, specifically single family home and so on. Some of the elements and building components, construction components, they are standard, but the process how to build with them is very different, right? So when we do something with robotics for retail solution or be consumer electronics, I typically with a product design process, I optimize for the cost or for the for the quality. It's everywhere, right? But in construction, it's very different because then I need to think about the system that will allow me to deliver certain different designs, right? So there is a level of flexibility, also certain constraints and rules that I need to accommodate for, and also regulation. I mean, regulation is more or less everywhere in consumer electronics, yes. In kind of retail solution too. In construction, there are more layers into regulation and requirements, but it's good and bad. by the end of the day, we live in these buildings, right? Whenever you enter the building, I don't think like, you have a new idea. Is this building safe, right? Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. So let's talk about Mighty Buildings. So what's your main focus area at Mighty Buildings these days?
In Mighty Buildings, like specifically about my role and what I drive is innovation. So it's a product design, it's material science, it's robotics, and those three combined together. Because what we do, we do 3D printing. We have our own proprietary material. And 3D printing, we do it with print panels in the factories. Then we ship panels from the factory for to assemble the exterior envelope, like Lego block. The beauty of what we invented as a material is that it's lighter than concrete, it's stronger, and the longevity of it is more than 50 years. And we keep developing in terms of iterating and improving the system. Right now we're on generation number 3, and we already brought like 3 generations of material to the market. And focuses are on cost reduction, carbon footprint reduction, and ease of assembly. Also enhancing some of the features. So we're also working on kind of like how to simplify the assembly, how to simplify the process of doing MEP with our walls and so on.
Wow. So at Mighty Buildings, you run the innovation where you manage product design, material science, robotics, and basically you're 3D printing these panels in the factory that can be assembled by Lego blocks on the site right now. For the customers of Mighty Buildings, what are the biggest pain points you're solving for them? Seems like you already alluded to cost reduction, carbon footprint reduction, and ease of assembly. But can you talk through us from a customer lens, like a building developer? What are the biggest pain points they're facing right now that Mighty Buildings solves?
Speed and quality. So speed is, exterior envelope can be assembled within 1 week for a single family home of, let's say, from 1,500 square foot to 2,500, 2-story, literally within 5 days.
Wow.
That's a huge acceleration for any developer. Then you can bring your contractors to finish interior, right? But you're not going to be dependent on weather. So for some of the areas, like, if it's desert, if it's something somewhere where winter is, so it's a huge benefit. And it simplified the process in terms of exposure to construction loan and interest rates, right? So they're like, timing becoming shorter, meaning less payments and less interest payments. So that's number one. Longevity and low maintenance is another one. So for anyone doing a build to rent, it's a huge benefit because then the amount of money that need to be secured for maintenance is significantly lower compared to traditional buildings. And we have a system that's certified for hurricane impact. So that's also a benefit. And it's lighter, right? So if we need some logistics, for instance, for precast concrete is heavy and reinforced concrete is very heavy, right? There is not all the destinations where it can be delivered. Our material is less weight and meaning that more efficient.
So I read somewhere about you using polymers for 3D printing these. So can you explain to the average listener who doesn't know anything about building science, how the materials you use in 3D printing improve speed while keeping quality equal or better than the quality of buildings that they're living in or thinking about buying?
Yeah. So our material is considered synthetic stone. Synthetic stone is something similar to artificial countertops or kitchen tops. Just to give you the analogy, it's not the same material, it's stronger. 3D printing allows us to do complex geometries. And one other cool feature is to have some different exterior look. So we can create certain geometries that's not going to be repeated. So from construction perspective, it's the same panel, right? But on the outside, the exterior face is different. Right? We can even imprint some logos or some rock stone like waves, whatever is a preference. So we can easily do this. That's the huge benefit for both final customers or homeowners as well as developer. So, for people, I would say that will be the best to explain what are their look and feel and benefits of using our kit.
And what differentiates Mighty Buildings from 99% of the rest of the market?
I would say those two things is speed and policy. Yeah. I mean, because it doesn't matter if it's 3D printed, it's casted, right? If it's like banded or it's done by hands, by the end of the day, it's a panel that's on site and it's need to be installed by the if we have a system and the subcontractor is able to do it faster and throughout the lifespan of the building, we extend it and the low maintenance, that's a benefit regardless of what system it's housed.
And do you build the whole building? So not just the four walls, but the roofing, the interior, the plumbing, the electrical as well? Or
No. We act as a supplier. We have a team that will to the site and train contractor and subcontractors to assemble our system, because I think that this is a key component to multiply, right? How to multiply rather than being constrained by our own resources and be operational heavy. So our team goes on, so 2 times to the site where they're developing it to deliver let's say 40 units, and the rest of the units being completed by we just need to do get some quality reports. So that's one of the main advantages.
it sounds amazing. It sounds too good to be honest. Is there any risks of working with mighty buildings?
So one of the things that it's very when doing comparison to traditional components, right? It's very hard to do this comparison. So I wouldn't say it's a risk, but first to understand that our panel is more or less fully finished from exterior to interior, right? So and most of the construction companies or developers, they will compare it on material specification, right? Not including labor, not including time, not including interest that you get for construction loan. So that's one of the things. Another thing is that it's still new system, right? I'm internally very confident in our system and all the tests that we have done, because according to building codes, we have a way more. So our safety buffer for all calculations that we do, way higher compared to traditional, because it's a new material. So meaning, for instance, when I say I can withstand category 5 or let's say 180 miles per hour of the wind, meaning that we can withstand even more.
Wow.
Why? Because our safety factor is way higher compared to wood, to steel, or
Fascinating. Alexey, what was your aha moment of scale while building this business in the last 7-8 years?
So there were a few aha moments, but I would say they organically happened. I remember when we just started with B2C model. So the first entry point to the market was ADU successor units. So that's the units for the backyards. And I think we succeeded in this. So we delivered a bunch of units for individual consumers. But at a certain point, we understood that it's moving very slow. We need to grow our operational overhead to maintain and run this business. Some of the things are really out of our control, family situation or financials and so on. Permitting is also very hard to predict. So with this, I was kind of curious, what if we can do some development or B2B? And I in 2020, so we closed the first deal. Early 2021, we signed 2020, we signed an agreement, and in 2021, it crystallized to real development. That was the first B2B deal, and then I understood okay, maybe B2B deal is longer timeline, but then I don't need to maintain all contractor relationships, subcontractors, so to manage all the procurement and so on, and focus on the things that I create, within Mighty Buildings, meaning this panelized system. So the first development also where Mighty Buildings, we provided everything, almost everything. Next, I thought that probably it's going to be good to do some sort of reference design. So for instance, if you're a developer, I'll offer you, I'm still going to offer you a number of reference designs. The chances that these designs are going to fit your requirements, I don't know. It really depends, right? Because most of our designs are created, for instance, for Florida, for California. If you're building in Illinois or in Seattle, right, there will be different style and different requirements. So we'll use our design as input, but probably your architect and engineer will need to chime in and kind of change a lot of things, and that's okay. So that's when I understood to kind of like, first was switching from B2C to B2B, right? To maintain the focus on the right thing. Second one was to kind of like, rather than providing this full design, to kind of like provide the kit and a design library with our panels and allow you to design like, with our system. So we're still executing number 3, and that was like, a couple of aha moments on our journey. And as you can see, it's less about 3D printing, less about like, robotic systems or software or hardware, right? It's more about like, how interact with the customer and who is the customer, what is our product offering.
And seems like one of the themes you also mentioned in a different interview was something around teleconstruction. So it's something along the lines of getting data from the site to manage operations on the teleconstruction theme. Can you explain to our listeners, what that specific segment of your industry is?
Teleconstruction? Yeah, teleconstruction, I think, the pathway to, now I'm wearing kind of like, my investment hat, right? We also implemented some of these parts in Mighty Building with the logic is the following. So ultimately, where we want to be with construction is to have like more or less fully automated process. Are we ready for that? Likely now. And from hardware and software perspective, also from user perspective. I mean, I know there is a lot of companies and people who will disagree. They will say like, we're ready and we're building solutions. However, I think they resolving only part of there. For the rest, there's still going to be a lot of collaboration between people and machine. So that's where teleconstruction becoming very interesting, because teleconstruction, let's add some labor shortage to this, right? You to have like very experienced people to do certain jobs, right? So what if they don't need to go to the site, but they can manage the robot or the machine to do like, the job accommodated by some, more junior people. That's what I call teleconstruction. So meaning that any construction site will have to invest into data infrastructure first to have a reliable like connection, to have like, be able to compare what they're building to like BIM model. And obviously it's not required for all the projects, right? You don't need it for ADU or for small size single home, right? But when it is a development and there is 50 or 100 unit, that's something that probably will have a good return of investment, and will increase activity. So that's where like teleconstruction become very interesting, where someone remote can manage the job being done on site, and even multiple sites. So that's and there is a bunch of things starting from excavation, crane systems, paging, and so on, where it can be controlled fully remote.
Yeah, seems like you have quite a lot of breadth of exposure across the construction industry. Now, coming back to Mighty Buildings, how do you deal with California regulations as well, especially the fire hazard regulations? How do you benchmark against fire resistance as well?
So we, that's by the way, one of the other things that we decided to do very early, to invest heavy into tests, all the tests that are required, and build a relationship with all the regulation and test bodies in the US and internationally. So for fire, we have a class A fire spread index, so meaning that our panels, they don't kind of spread fire. It's our panels, like, actually safe. So for, remember all the fires in California, right? So with our panels, probably like, if it's going to be exposed to the direct fire for a long period of time, it's not going to burn out. It just will crystallize and the fire will not penetrate. We have assembly, but again, it's for the panel, right? Typically the weakest point of any construction is because the connection is where the fire can get through, the air can get through, and so on. So for the connection, for the assembly, we have solutions for both 1 hour fire rating and 2 hour fire rating. And 2 hour fire rating is more expensive.
Fascinating. Alexey, what's your biggest aspiration for the next 12 months at Mighty Building?
We are already global. So we're building not only in the US, we have building delivered in the country. And I think my biggest aspiration is to get to massive developments. It's still in progress. So that's what motivates me, regardless of where it's going to happen. If it's going to happen like in the US or outside, we have
Wow.
so much.
And what's the biggest bottleneck to growing forward?
At this stage is it's I would say some of the developers that struggle with financing, right, because of high interest rates, specifically in the US. For some of the other customers, I would say like this is more related to, again, our system is new, right? So it requires number of kind of consensus between different parties. And in some cases, some parties they don't have like the same interest in terms of like delivering fast, right? So because developer is the owner, they want to deliver it fast, so the speed is very important to that. Same time, it's not that trivial that they need to pay a little bit more on a design phase to make sure that they. But again, the investment and design phase is, I think, the low hanging to avoid kind of like more expensive exposure to payments in the future when you down the road on the execution of the process. So this logic is not yet kind of like, no, I don't see this logic like used very often, only with a few. And maybe it depends. It's because of some of the builders, they more like build to sell. I see more like build to rent. They have a different logic because they want to execute fast, and also they it's not important for them only to be like a little bit up above the requirements, minimum requirements. They want to build that they're not going to be exposed to a lot of problems throughout the lifespan, or like for their time when they need to operate.
Completely agree. Then talking about the future, like say, what's your ultimate vision for the future of the build tech or the construction tech industry?
Look, construction, I think the future is first of all bright, and labor shortage obviously is not good. But on the other hand, labor shortage is such a huge power to speed up innovation in the construction industry too. And it touches like all aspects throughout the value chain, starting from design up to like building and procurement, pre-construction, construction phases, and so on. So even permitting are getting more predictable right now in certain regions using certain tools. And I see like the cities are utilizing some of the digital tools, as well as companies investing into this. And on the other hand, like there is a huge demand for automated and better versions of certain construction methods. It's happening you can talk to any, probably at least from my network, I won't say like any, but from my network, all contractors, be it like on residential, commercial, they always say we need more automation on site because they just don't have people, or like some system that will reduce number of trades. It doesn't mean the trades need to go away, right? It means that some of the trades will need to requalify, or new people will go into construction industry. So someone from the university, let's say with a degree in robotics, will be happy to do the construction, not to work with a hammer, but actually to manage the robotic system. So that's something. And another thing is happening is we see a lot of failures in a prefab space, right? So it's going out of business. But at the same time, those who were able to find their customer and they define their product well, they're doing good, right? And more developers and more designs are utilizing prefabricated systems. For instance, like in bathroom pods, there is a number of bathroom pods providers, and I think they're heavily booked for the next probably like half a year or a year or so. And that's like because bathroom is like one of the very expensive things. And when it shows up on site, it's like a box. It's placed with a crane, connected with the utility. All the utilities, all the connections already tested in the factory. It's a huge money and time saver. So those systems, I see them more and more. And material innovation is also happening in parallel. So it has very longer introduction. Time to introduce into the market, but I see more and more different type of materials engineered.
Yeah, constraints are a hidden source of innovation, right? The constraints in the labor market are essentially incentivizing innovation across the whole construction tech pipeline. Alexey, I'd love to ask you some rapid fire questions. What do you know about your industry that would surprise most listeners?
How fragmented and disconnected it is.
And how fragmented is it?
Um, it's literally like, a lot of time spent on, a lot of people, they are just kind of like, okay, it is as it is, but it doesn't mean it should be like this. There is a number of companies that build so my point is that, it's obvious, but at the same time, if you think about it from a different reality, it can be different. It's only the way of kind of I'm okay with that, so I need to go the same route over and over again. No, you don't. If you want to do it differently, start optimizing for drastic and rustic efficiencies, say no to a lot of things, right? And multiplying only the route that can be executed multiple times. That's, I think, the core, one of the key elements for growth and rapid growth. So I think it's just very hard for a lot of in the industry, specifically in real estate, to understand that it's not the way it is and should be. They might be different way. And there is players, for instance, most of the successful, even regional and small contractors, why they're efficient? Because they built their backend being fully tech enabled. They don't show it to anyone, but if you start looking into this, they actually build their workflows and processes based on the constraints saying no to a lot of things that outside of it. They're like, I will not be efficient if you want this. Sorry, I'm not doing it. That's okay. But they are number ones in their regions, not because they're following the traditional process, because they decided to do it differently.
On that note, I'd love to ask you a question. So if a developer is listening to this and they're really interested in using, your Mighty Buildings 3D printing model, how should they reach out to you or your
email? Alexey at mightybuildings.com or LinkedIn. So we'll be the two best channels.
Absolutely. If a family office calls you, Alexey, and says, they've just had a liquidity event and they've invested in a bunch of investments across asset classes, but now they have $100 million left over that they just want to invest in real estate, how would you advise them?
Look, if they already have the portfolio invested, and I'm sure they have their real estate portfolio, right? Then my question will be how their real estate portfolio is structured based on commercial, infrastructure and residential. So in this case, they might divide this portfolio to invest in some of the venture companies or technology companies that will enable them to do for their real estate portfolio to perform better. The logic is the following, right? So most of the systems that, for instance, are used for managing properties, being commercial, residential, are very, 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 very outdated, right? And that's why we see another boom of prop tech or real estate technology systems, because the old generation of the system were created in the beginning of 2000 or late 90s. They're good, absolutely good. They're still doing what they need to do. But when a customer opens it up or seeing it, they're like, what is that? So, but there's a thing to that, and also customer expectation, they change, right? So investing into some of the technologies that can reduce, for instance, the amount of water consumed by resident is a huge saving, because I think the water is the second largest bill. Water and sewer, they're connected, right? Because the more water you use, the higher your sewer bill. So that's the second one after.
Wow. Yeah. What organization or institution would you fix if you had the time to fix it?
To fix it, I think zoning and planning department. And I would say that's number one answer to everyone will be zoning, permitting. Another hand, it's I don't know how much. I don't think it's. If you ask me if it's doable, I'm not sure, because all the regulations and rules are there for the reason, and just based on the legal structure and requirement, I'm not sure there is a pathway to can do certain stuff or simplify. I'm sure they're doing it internally, just taking time, and I understand the reason. That's okay, right? Because most of the small jurisdictions, they have not a huge number of staff, right? They don't have huge budget to implement like some tech-enabled solution or even like to digitalize something. So it's a lot of stuff done manually, unfortunately.
Yeah. And Alexey, if your loved ones agree to be mentored by you, what is the number one you would teach?
Number one skill, I think, is to be able to, in some cases, like we can, on one hand, like, I told you that motivation and kind of like, dedication to something is very good. But number one skill is to be able to observe like different situations, just observe, right? Without your kind of like, I want to build this, this should be done by, how I see it or how I want it. Because acceptance of and readiness to be wrong is more valuable than anything else, right? Because that's how we learn, right? And in majority of cases, it's just, okay, maybe that's not how I want it or how I envision it, but that's still okay. And I will just write and learn from it. So I think that's very important. In some cases, it's very hard just to be open to that, be hard to be wrong. And specifically when you have like into this, but the sooner it's going to happen, the better, right? Because spend your energy, your attention on something else.
Couldn't agree more. It's very important to be motivated and dedicated, but you should be able to observe, collect information, synthesize what's working wrong, and be ready to be wrong as quickly as possible so you can course correct your actions. That was Alexey Dubov, core believer in the principles of openness and curiosity, a co-founder of Mighty Buildings and currently the chief innovation officer there. He's also started a venture capital fund called BuildTech. If you're a developer looking to work with Mighty Buildings so you can build, industry standard housing at scale, you can reach out to him on alexey@mightybuildings.com or find him on LinkedIn on Alexey Dubov. We'll add the link in the description. This is Nik Shah. If you ever want to talk about real estate anytime, shoot me a note on ceo@home.llc. Thanks, everyone.